So good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's postgraduate information session for risk management. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Marisha Nelany and I'm the host for today for this 30-minute session. I work in the recruitment and conversion team here at GCU. Before we begin, just a quick couple of housekeeping notes. All microphones and cameras are disabled for during this session to ensure a smooth experience for everyone. And if you have any questions at any point, if you could please pop them into the Q&A box. We'll be answering as many questions as we can during the Q&A session, which will be at the end of the presentation. I'd also just like to make you aware that today's session is being recorded. It'll be available on the GCU YouTube page in the coming weeks, so you'll be able to watch it back or share it with others if you've found that useful. Now, I'm pleased to introduce you to today's presenter. This is Dr. John McNeill, who will be speaking about risk management today, and I'll hand you over to John.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming along to hear a bit more about the programme. I should probably start by just telling you very briefly about myself. So, as Marisha said, I'm John. I lead the programme here at Glasgow Caledonian University. I've lectured in risk for 10 years now, and actually I studied this programme back in 2013-14, so I've experienced it from quite literally both sides of the classroom. One being a student, which some of you might end up being, and also clearly as a member of staff. I found my way into risk management via engineering. That's what I studied my undergraduate in. That's what I worked in for a while. I did a little bit of insurance as well. And at the age of 29, I made the decision to come back and, as I say, do this programme. And from there, I developed a key interest in risk management. And my particular area of focus is the psychology of risk. So I look at behavioural risk management, and that's what my PhD's in. But primarily, obviously, I'm here to tell you about the programme rather than myself. There'll be plenty of time if you join to talk to me and find out a bit more about me if that's what you're interested in. But without further ado, I'll run through my slides. Maybe take us 15-20 minutes, and there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end. So please do feel free, as I'm going through this, to make a note of any questions you may have, jot them down, and pop them in the chat room for later on. Okay. So I think the best place to start here is to actually tell you a bit about what type of risk management it is that we do, because risk and risk management mean a lot of different things to different people, and that makes sense because there is a lot of risk going on in the world today. There's a lot of political risk, economic risk, social risks, technological risks, legal risks, environmental risks, and these all create challenges for organizations. And the way we approach risk management is that we recognize that good risk management isn't about avoiding everything. The reason organizations take risk is because that there's opportunities associated with those risks. It'd be ideal if when you were running your organization that things never went wrong, but unfortunately we do. Or things do go wrong. So what we need is risk managers who are capable of asking questions such as, what might happen? How likely is it? How bad will it be if it does happen? And what can we do about it? And we don't look at, when we're trying to answer these questions within our course, we don't look at it from a spreadsheet basis specifically. And what I mean about that is a lot of people would think about risk management and say, risk management is predominantly about numbers and predominantly about spreadsheets. And depending on the type of risk management you do, then that can be true. But we focus on how people make decisions. We focus on how they decide about risk. We focus about how they communicate about risk. We focus on how organizations and people behave under pressure. We focus on risk management from what I would describe as a business management perspective. Where does risk come from? How do organizations shape it? What can they do to manage it in practice? And what does that mean about how we incentivize people within our organizations to manage risk? So we teach risk in a more qualitative way than other programs. We don't do hardcore insurance or hardcore banking or hardcore crisis or hardcore disaster risk management or hardcore health and safety. These are all important, but we're very much looking at risk from a people and process perspective, taught in a way that would be very similar to a business management or an international business management subject. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about the style that we approach risk from. And based on the way that we teach risk, that's where a lot of the value that we add in the market comes from. Now, we take a very unique approach, like I said. We teach risk from an enterprise perspective, a business management perspective, where the goal really is for students to understand all the different types of risks that could affect an organization's objectives and be able to draw a line between them to see how they all connect and be able to communicate that and design strategies in their organizations to help them respond to it. And this is the approach that we've taken now for over 33 years. We were the first program in the UK to offer a risk management program, and it started with the undergraduate. The masters, which I lead and which you're here to find out about today, it came online 3 years later. So we've been doing this for over 30 years. And what that means in practice is that the way that we teach risk, the skills that you will learn, this is tried, it's tested, and it's built around a solid reputation that employers recognise. And they recognise it and value it because we give you the skills that you actually need, which will lead you into the employment market and to help it secure you good opportunities. You're taught by staff as well, who all have a background in risk. As I say, I came at it from an engineering perspective with some insurance. We've got Dominic, who came at risk from a business continuity perspective. Emma, prior to lecturing, she was in health and safety. Rona was banking, and Ed was more broadly within business management and business operations. So every single one of us, when we teach you risk on the program, we're not just teaching you about the theory, which is really important, but what we're doing is we're passing on our industry expertise as a way to help contextualize your learning and tie the theory that you need to know in with the important theory that you'll have to develop as you go through the program. And that's a real unique blend of theory and practice, which other risk management courses can't necessarily offer. I think another important piece of the jigsaw that makes what we do so unique is that we have a departmental advisory group. And why that's important, and it relates to the point in the bottom corner around excellent industry links, which I'll share more about with you in a further slide. But we have a departmental advisory group which meets regularly and discusses our curriculum. So we're constantly getting feedback from practitioners out there in the real world to make sure that what we're teaching you is directly relevant to what's going on in industry. Again, helping make sure that the skills that you need are the skills that you have when you graduate. I won't double down on many more of the points on this slide at this particular juncture because I'm going to cover a lot of them later. But I think the key thing I'd like you to take away from this is that we've got over 30 years of experience doing this. We teach risk in a very specific way, which is well respected by employers, and we continually interact with employers to make sure our curriculum is valid. Now, you would expect me to say nice things about the degree, and that's because they're true, but I thought it'd be useful to give you a slide which just highlights what employers actually say about our degree. And I appreciate this slide may not be the most readable depending on the size of your screen, but what it shows in practice is that professional bodies such as IRMIC, such as the Institute of as the Institute of Risk Management, they have over the years singled out our program for its excellence, the high regard that they hold it in. It's well regarded by industry, it's seen as practical, and it's closely aligned with what industry needs. You'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got Jerry Healy, who's the head of risk oversight at Barclays Bank here in the UK. He actually studied our degree, and he still speaks fondly, not just of his time studying the programme, but also of the high regard that Barclays Bank continues to hold the programme in today, where it recognises us as producing strong graduates, which companies like Barclays employ. In the bottom left, for example, you've got Mike Hammond. Mike spent his time in senior roles in the insurance industry in both London and across America. And he's actually involved now in the London Insurance Market Charitable Trust, who sponsor some of the students that are on our programme. And you'll see that he speaks of his delight to support our programme. So I thought this slide would be worthwhile to flag to you, just to support that it's not just myself that's saying nice things about the degree and speaking to its relevance, speaking to its strength in the market, but also highly reputable organisations and practitioners in the field. I often get questions about who is it that studies risk management, and the answer to that is people from all backgrounds. Some students have never studied risk management before, and they worry that they don't have the prior knowledge that they're going to require in order to successfully complete a master's programme. But the good news is that risk doesn't belong to one discipline. It belongs to all the disciplines that you see and more listed on this particular slide. Whether you study finance or film, travel and tourism, law, media, political science, human resource management, economics, risk is involved in all the decisions that you make. So we have a mix on our programme of students who've previously studied and or worked in risk management, but we also have a substantial proportion who want to build on their existing skill set from something that might be quite far removed on paper, and they want to try something new. And as I say, to those who are very experienced in their careers, to being relatively recent in their careers in risk management, or having studied risk management previously. Students in the risk management cohort are wide and varied. And it's our job to build your knowledge from the very beginning up to master's level, and or give you the opportunity, if you've got more experience, to help refine it into more expertise that you can take into the workplace to help advance your career. So the answer is that it doesn't matter what your background is, be it zero or be it very experienced. It is possible for you to study risk management, because risk decision making is central to every organisation. I thought this slide would be useful because it just gives you an overview of the modules. And we could spend an awful lot of time going through what each of these involve. Clearly, we don't have that, but I think what's important to take from this is that we look at risk in a very rounded way. If you're someone who, for example, likes psychology, then you'll like behavioural risk management that I teach. Here we look at the psychological influences on people's risk-taking. If you're going to understand what good risk management looks like, you have to understand more about the conditions that make people take risk. If you're the type of person that likes strategy and planning for unknown futures, you'll love strategic foresight analysis. This is all about thinking ahead, looking at signals and emerging trends, and trying to identify risks which are coming down the path that could affect different sectors and different organizations, and developing scenarios and coming up with plans to try and prevent your organization from being caught off guard. If you're the type of person that likes to learn from the mistakes of others, you'll really enjoy crisis and operational resilience. Here you'll look at famous case studies of where organisations have been caught off guard by extreme events, and their organisation has been thrown into crisis, and you'll study about why that was and how they recovered. What strategies did they use? What strategies were less effective? What should they do next time to prevent themselves being caught off guard and thrown into crisis? You'll also look at how organisations should communicate during a crisis. If you're the type of person that likes to think about risk in an international setting, then you'll like managing risk in the global economy. Here you'll study political risk. How do changes in government, social unrest, military coups, how do they affect how organisations manage risk? What about foreign exchange risk? How does the changing values of one currency relative to another, how does that affect your organisation? How does the war in Iran, for example, have the potential to impact the supply chains of companies all around the world? So if you're interested in risk from that global perspective, then that module would be for you. Clearly, that's only 3 or 4 modules that I've covered here, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour as to the type of risks and diverse areas that you would find yourself looking into if you were to study the course. And I think you'll agree that it is quite interesting, it is quite novel, and it'll certainly keep you engaged, current and up to date as you go through the course. It won't just be myself, Dominic, Emma, Rona and Ed, who I mentioned earlier, who all have industry experience that will teach you. It will be guest lecturers from industry. Over the past year, for example, we've had representatives from Babcock Engineering who are involved in the nuclear defence sector here in the UK. We've had Sedgwick Insurers, we've had Mace, a construction management company, we've had Network Rail, we've had Turner and Townsend, we've had Faithful and Gould, and that's just off the top of my head. Most modules will have guest speakers to come in and complement what we teach you from an academic perspective by bringing in their industry perspective. And not only that, we have 2 associate lecturers who are attached to our programme. Both of them have substantial industry experience. You have Craig Forson, who's a Chartered Fellow of the Institute of Risk Management, and he'll come in and help support you with some of the approaches to modelling risk within organisations, how we understand probability and uncertainty, and how we design models to help assess how likely risk is and how much it's going to cost organisations. So he'll use his industry experience to help you build some technical analysis skills around modelling and understanding risk. Charlie, on the other hand, he's a fellow of the Business Continuity Institute, and he's got extensive experience of running his own crisis management firm, and he actually does training for the Business Continuity Institute, such as his reputation, and he looks at areas such as managing cyber risk, how organisations respond under pressure, how they communicate under risk, and how they make decisions when information is incomplete. So hopefully what you see here is that it's not just academics who'll be teaching you about the subject. It's real firms who are practicing risk management and real leaders in the field who'll come in to share their experience to help, again, just make sure that you get a rounded skill set that you can use to your benefit when it comes to applying for jobs once you've completed the Masters. How will we assess you? Well, the good news is that because most people don't like exams, we don't actually have any exams on the programme. Instead, what we do is we operate on a coursework or a group work based model. And neither do we just expect you to write straightforward, boring essays. We've developed assessments which actually are quite interesting and engaging and less passive than the traditional essays. So take, for example, the behavioural risk audit. The purpose of that would be for you to think about an example where you made a decision that carried real consequences, either in your personal or your professional life. And you break down and you analyse your own risk taking. You look to identify the biases which caused you to make the decisions that you did, whether it was effective, whether they were effective or whether they weren't. And it'll help you to develop patterns in your own risk taking so that you can spot them in yourselves and others, and hopefully improve the decisions that you and others make in the future. So it's really quite an engaging task. Similarly, if you look at the second option, the second assessment, developing a scenario plan of future risks, you get to choose an industry. You build 3 future scenarios of events that could impact them achieving their objectives. It could be an economic downturn, it could be the threat of AI, it could be regulatory change, it could be environmental change. And you look to explain how each scenario could affect the organisation in the future, and you propose actions to make them resilient. And you get to focus on specific risks that you're interested in rather than ones that we tell you about. I think the final one's quite important because I said it was a business management style degree and it wasn't highly quantitative, and that's absolutely true. You don't have to be a numbers person to do this program. But all risk managers do have to have some kind of understanding of what the output of risk models mean. So that last assessment, you'll be given the output of a risk model based on a project, and it's your job to understand what the numbers mean in plain terms so that you can recommend a decision. It's really important that risk managers can interpret the output of others. Many risk management failures in the past have been a consequence of organisations not being able to critique and challenge the output of models in the past. We don't want that to happen again. It's a real skill that employers are looking for, and we'll give you the chance to complete a coursework on that. As you go through the course, you'll develop a lot of skills. Those skills have been officially recognised by 2 professional bodies. The Institute of Risk Management, that's our main accrediting body, where because our curriculum, what we teach you, matches so closely with their expectations, you achieve full exemptions from their international diploma in risk management. So at the moment, once you complete the MSc Risk Management, you will be able to take your qualification right to the Institute of Risk Management. And assuming nothing else changes, and I don't understand why it would, but I have to put that caveat in there, you're able to cash in your Masters for the International Diploma in Risk Management offered by the IRM. And that's great because that'll save you thousands of pounds and months, if not a year of studying to achieve that out in the industry. So that's real value that's being added. If you're an insurance person and you want to use the risk management program for exemption from the Chartered Insurance Institute's exams, then you'll be able to do that also, where you can claim 60 credits towards CII qualifications. Currently, we're double accredited. These are our badges of honour, if you will, and moving forward, we'll be looking for treble accreditation, possibly with the Association of Project Management or the Chartered Management Institute. We'll see how that goes, but that's work for me to do over the next year or so. So currently doubly accredited, that's excellent, and that's a sign of quality. What opportunities will you have when you join us? Well, it won't just be to attend lectures. It'll be, you'll have opportunities to interact with employers. You'll have the opportunity to network, to build your professional relationship. As a student of risk management at GCU, you will be able to get free membership of the Institute of Risk Management, ALARM, that's a public sector risk management body, IRMIC, that's a professional body for risk managers and insurance professionals, Chartered Insurance Institute, Scottish Continuity Group, Business Continuity Institute, Association of Project Management, and the Institute of Operational Risk. You'll be able to access their materials, you'll be able to access their events, you'll be able to attend speeches from them. For example, the students on Thursday were able to attend an online session by the Institute of Risk Management on the future of AI within the subject area. They'll also be able to attend a session on crisis management in conditions of terrorism by the Business Continuity Institute next month. So it's really exciting, and all these memberships will help supplement what you learn in class. And all of this is for free just by signing up with us. And I think it's fair to say that no other risk management program can rival this. You'll also have the Risk Clinic, which is unique to GCU. And the Risk Clinic takes multiple forms, but one of the ways it adds value to your program is it allows you again to connect with practitioners who'll come in with real world case studies, and they'll work with you around how do we solve these problems, what did you learn, how did we, if you were to face this problem in the workplace, what decisions would you make? And where it really adds value for students is clearly getting to meet employers. But it also means that when you go for interviews, you've got quite real world situations that you can sit down and talk about. And we've found that when our graduates have went for interviews, that the experience they've gained there has been really beneficial for them. You'll also have the Risk and Finance Society. Most recently, they've organised trips to Morgan Stanley and Barclays here in Glasgow. Again, giving you exposure to real world professionals. We've got the Bloomberg Lab. That's a financial lab. It's special software, special computers. You can go in there, you can analyze foreign exchange risk if that's your thing. You can look at how big events such as Trump's tariffs or interest rate changes or decisions by the central bank create consequences for the currencies of countries and how that affects organizations. You can develop real skills around that employers value. The opportunity to attend conferences. Back in February, students attended the Scottish Continuity Group's conference in Edinburgh, and some are going to Birmingham with me next month down to AIRMIC. So you've got lots of opportunities to do extracurricular activities if you're interested in MSc Risk Management. So I'm going to end very quickly in these last few slides to say, well, what type of risk jobs are there? And where do our graduates ultimately go? Because I do recognise that you want a return on your investment, and that's only fair. That's what risk management's about. It's about securing your return on investment. And I've chosen these two quotes because one's an industry recruitment perspective, and he speaks directly from the hiring market. And he's very clear. Hiring for risk management roles has never been more challenging. There is strong demand for risk professionals in the coming decade. That's not something that can be said for all programs and all subject areas. And because there's so much demand, the second quote that represents the body represents the wider profession, they're saying that salary growth is between 11 and 15%, specific to Canada and North America in this case, but actually we're seeing the same trends here in the UK and across the world. So if your goal is to leave university with strong job prospects, risk management will put you in a very good position. And the internal data that we've collected echoes this. We're seeing that risk management is ranked within the top 50 fastest growing jobs globally. We're seeing that in the UK alone, over 8,000 risk management jobs were advertised within the past 12 months. So there's real demand for this profession. And you can be confident that therefore that you're gaining a skill that employers value, they're willing to pay you for, and this demand is likely to continue in the future. So who is it that's demanding our graduates? Well, it's companies of all sectors. When we design this course, we deliberately design it so our graduates can go into the private industry, public sector, or even third sector charities if they choose. I've taken the logos here of employers who have recently, and by that I mean within the last few years that I could remember off the top of my head, that have employed our graduates. And these are all well-known big organisations. There are small organisations as well, but these large organisations are coming directly to us, circulating job opportunities in many cases, and recruiting our graduates directly. They're going into careers in oil and gas, banking and finance, insurance, accounting, project management, the NHS, that's public sector and health. And what are they doing there? They're becoming risk managers, credit risk analysts, enterprise risk managers, chief risk officers, insurance brokers, insurance underwriters, compliance risk officers. And I guess, well, hopefully what it conveys to you is that you've got so much options with your risk management degree. And if none of those jobs sound like, well, I don't necessarily sound like they're ideal for you. For example, market risk analyst, that's not really where I see my future. Take comfort that all organizations value risk thinkers. Being able to make decisions about risk, being able to differentiate good decisions from bad decisions, decisions that add value rather than destroy value. These are all decisions. These are all skills and decision-making qualities that employers all across the economy value. Risk employers specifically, but many that aren't. So choosing risk management also helps to keep your options open. So hopefully you found some of that interesting. Hopefully you found all of it interesting. Hopefully I've managed to convince you that certainly I'm a relatively normal person, and I can promise you that all my colleagues are. We recognise that the trust that you'd be placing in us, and I promise you that we would do a good job for you. We'll deliver interesting content that keeps you engaged, and we'll help you develop real skills that employers out there in the real world value, so that you're as well prepared as you can be when you finish up the course and it comes time to look for future employment. So thank you.
Thank you very much, John. That was such an interesting presentation. I'm sure everyone will agree. So now is the Q&A portion of our session. As mentioned earlier, if you do have any questions, please just type them into the Q&A box, and we'll just give it a few moments just to see if any come in, and I'll put your questions to John. If you don't have any questions just now, or you don't feel like you want to ask them in this forum, John's very helpfully popped his email address on screen, and I'm sure we'd be happy to answer any questions that come in after the session. So we'll just wait a wee minute just to see if any come in at all. Okay, John, so there's a wee question just come in there in the chat, if you're able to see that.
Yeah, I see one from Chiara. So Chiara's asked, how are students supported with their final research project, especially with choosing a topic? So, yeah, so I didn't cover that clearly within the presentation. You may have, if you recall back to the programme outline that I provided, you'll have seen that research methods is a module that you would study in your second trimester. And then in your third trimester, because the master's is over 3 trimesters, you would study your master's research project. Both of these modules are connected. So when it comes to choosing your topic, you would do that within the postgraduate research methods module, as I say, within the second trimester of your study. You have a module tutor who will be related to risk. They will be able to advise you on it, on the design of your topic, as well as specific research questions. You can come to your tutors and ask us. So if you've got a particular interest in behavioural risk management or insurance or project risk, for example, you could go to the module leader who teaches you around that area, and they'll be able to help guide you. And quite often as well, what we do, and I know this happened this year, for example, that Emma actually wrote to many of our practitioner friends or alumni or industry contacts, and we asked them to recommend projects that they were interested in, issues that they were focusing on in their own workplaces, as a way to help point students towards contemporary topics that are relevant for the real world environment. So we'll have a module tutor who's a risk expert. You've got your lecturers you can go and speak to and ask to. You can ask them about. And in addition to that, it's more than likely that you'll have some sample questions, which we've managed to collect from our industry partners to help guide you in your choice. Hopefully that answers your question. If it doesn't, please feel free to ask another question and I will get back to you. Alternatively, email me and I will do likewise. So I see Peter has a question as well. Peter, what have you asked? You've asked me, is this course the right choice for an individual who took an interest in risk management after about 2 years working in a risk directorate without having a theoretical background academically in risk? Peter, absolutely, no problem at all. Like I said earlier, many of the students who come onto the programme aren't from risk backgrounds. And what I mean by that is they've either not studied risk previously or they've not worked in it previously. But they do wish to have a career in risk in the future. So absolutely no problem at all. If your background isn't risk, that will not be a barrier. The entry requirements, as I understand them, require a 2-2 UK degree or equivalent, if not based in the UK or if it wasn't secured in the UK. And it can be in any subject area. And the reason that that's offered in risk management is because, like I say, risk isn't the property of one discipline. Risk applies to all disciplines. Any decision making is everywhere, and any decision entails risk. So it's important that everyone understands what risk is. And actually, whatever your background is, I suspect you will have been you'll been exposed to some risk management concepts implicitly. They might not have been labeled as risk and risk management. And actually, you'll know a bit more than maybe you think on day zero. But don't worry, if you were to come along on day one and you felt that you weren't sure, we'd be able to build you up from zero. So don't worry about that.
Okay, I think that's all the questions that we have had submitted. If there's any last ones, feel free to pop them in the chat. Can't see anyone typing or anything. So that brings us to the end of today's session. So thank you very much, John, once again for your time and your expertise and for giving a good insight into the risk management programme for postgraduates. And a big thank you to all of our attendees for coming along and for your engaging questions there at the end. So just a wee reminder that this session will be available on GCU YouTube page in the coming weeks if you do want to revisit any of the content. And again, hope you found today's session helpful, and we'll look forward to welcoming as many of you as we can back to GCU for some postgraduate study. Thank you again and have a great day.
Perfect. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.